So this week we want to make it a little different today. I know it's a couple days after Christmas and everybody's probably tired and everybody's moving on to the new year, the big holiday coming up this week. We all love New Year's, but I want to spend a few minutes talking about kind of the dichotomy of Christmas and the season itself and kind of what it leads us into with the new year. You know, I've always found Christmas to be an interesting phenomenon in America, right? Because I feel like there's two Christmases. And no, this isn't the sort of the PC Christmas and the Christian Christmas. You know, we all sort of run to this finish line at Christmas where I think as Christians we want to celebrate generosity, really, because that's what Christ modeled for us, is immense generosity, the willingness to shed his heavenly blessing to come live like us, to come live amongst the rabble and show us how much he loved us. And so we want Christmas to sort of be a celebration of that, while most of us who I think are at least somewhat leveled off spiritually, we don't freak out when Christmas is robbed, you know, of that meaning. So we sort of run with that parallel determination of the retail Christmas. And I don't mean that negatively. I don't mean that as far as consumerism. I mean, we want to give people stuff, right? I mean, we want to be able to afford to give our children the best gifts, not the most expensive, but we want to give them what they need. We want to give them things they're going to use. You know, a good example last year with Travis, you know, at 5 years old last year, you know, he got gifts from everybody. Like, everybody's like, he's a cute little boy, give him presents, right? And so he had like 1,000 gifts on Christmas from all these different entities in the family. And everybody bought him like the same kind of toy. You know, so he was on like this neurological overload, right? You ever seen a kid who just has so much stuff that they don't even, like, their stuff still in the box, their stuff is like half opened because they can't even get to it because there's like, oh, I gotta spend so much time with this toy and then I've gotta give this toy for 25 minutes of my day. So last year we just took a whole bunch of the ones he didn't open and threw them in the closet and just gave it to him throughout the year. Gosh, it is funny. You know, my dad's the greatest. You know, but the idea is that we sort of, you know, he was on this sort of neurological overload because we want to give him things. And so there's this retail parallel of Christmas that kind of runs alongside what we as Christians, I'm sure some of you guys are very determined Christians and you guys have this, your very Jesus is the reason for the season, but most of us, we all run that sort of parallel day. We get up and you know, I don't know if we're quite as extreme as like my father-in-law who likes to sing Happy Birthday Jesus, which is still a little weird for me. But when there's only 5 people in the room, bro, you gotta sing, right? You're like, you know, my sons are all, you know, so he's really into that. You'll edit that part out frequently. I don't want my wife to see that part. But we have this sort of parallel thing that kind of takes place all throughout the Christmas season. So we kind of run into this sort of post-Christmas blues, which is, I don't know about you guys, but I was talking to John, I think, this morning about it. Every Christmas around 10 a.m., my wife and I say the exact same thing to each other. All that work, and it's over in an hour, right? Does everybody say that, or is it just me?
It's just like a wedding.
For Thanksgiving.
Oh no, but Thanksgiving has football after. And it goes forever. Thanksgiving goes all day. And you can eat the turkey again. You can't rewrap the presents. I guess you could try. Might be able to fool Travis with that one. Sweet, I already have one of these. Now you have 2. But the idea is that, you know, it's like you work your tail off and all of a sudden it's like, and so, and you run into this sort of post-Christmas kind of blues. And so it's always been an interesting parallel to what happens the very next week, which is here comes New Year's. New Year's in and of itself is a completely odd phenomenon, right? We wake up on New Year's Day, January 1st, like John was singing about, perfect set list this morning too, what I'm talking about, it's fantastic. This idea that we wake up on New Year's and we're going to start over, right? We have the same debt, we have the same income, right? Have the same family, have the same enemies, have the same, I don't know, probably put those two together was weird. We have the same family and enemies. We have the same, protagonists in our life. Everything's the same. But we're going to wake up with a new day, a new start. We're going to start over. I'm going to fix everything I screwed up in the last 42 years of my life. And I'm going to make good on it. This January is going to be different. We all say that, right? And then like John said, 15 days in, for those who really stick to it, for most of us it's January 2nd, we're right back to being what we were before. Because you can't just pick up and start over, right? Because you still got the baggage. You got to do something with the luggage you've been lugging around for all those years. You can't just leave your bags unattended. See how I worked that into Homeland? That's security at the same time. So, James 5 says, "Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire, and you have hoarded wealth in the last days." So, Merry Christmas. And James says, awesome. But the reality is, anytime you have more than you need, it rots. The truth is, anytime that you have more than you're going to actually use, it's going to rot. It's going to gather dust. It's going to decay. It's going to fall apart. But we live in a society where the answer is always more. Right? We live in a society, the American dream says to us, man, you got to have more. You got to have more wealth, more land, more stuff. You got to have more cars. You got to have more toys. And I don't mean like little kid toys. I mean adult toys, right? Because adult toys rule, right? Boats, jet skis, helicopters. Some of them might be out of your reach. But the reality is the American dream has always been, we function on more. We function on acquisition, attainment, gathering. We function on getting more and more for ourselves. And it's easy to look at this passage, I think, and sort of assume he's talking about the financially rich. But the truth is, the rotten overstock in your life ultimately testifies against you, right? The smell of your waste. When we have things that are corroding and things that are going bad, it creates an odor. It creates something that just says you're wasting stuff. And you can't hide it. You can't push it away. There is a reality to what we waste. There's a reality to what we throw away, not because we don't use it anymore, but because we never used it to begin with. We wanted more. Christmas is always been that sort of weird parallel to where I think a lot of us as parents who maybe have a situation where we can give our kids a lot, maybe one Christmas more than normal, but we often think about that tension of they're going to end up wasting almost all of this. I don't know about you, but very few of my Christmas presents as a child growing up lasted till February. Right? I got bored of them, or I broke them. Very, very rarely did I have anything that made it to February. And my parents would work their tails off to get me these things, and I would basically destroy it or lose it or break it or whatever in a short amount of time. The reality is, but when we have things that waste, when we have things in our life and we accumulate things and we never use them, they just sit there. When somebody else could use what we have and we don't give it away. When someone else uses what we can have and we don't have opportunity to share it with them, we're ultimately going to be responsible, is what James is saying here in James 5. We're going to be responsible for what we didn't share. We're going to be responsible for the things that we didn't allow to care for other people. If we look as it continues on, it says, look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You've lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. This is an extremely apropos passage to our country right now. This is right on target with the things that we are dealing with in the United States of America. Is that basically those who we have neglected are crying out to God. We live in a cultural, political, social climate where those who have been neglected have been crying out for a long time. We live in a society where basically the people that we have stolen from are crying out. We live in a society now where we used to push the sort of certain factions and groups and social groups aside. We've pushed them down. We've taken what belonged to them, what rightfully belonged to them. Those we've victimized by our need to accumulate for ourselves are crying out. We're running into a society right now where the voice that is most common, the voice that is most loud, the voice that is most obvious is the voice of the neglected, those who've been victimized by theft, those who've had everything taken away from them. Those who have nothing are crying out against those who are taking it all. It's interesting that we live in a society where you have seen a shift. In our society, the strongest, most dominant voices used to be the rich. Used to be those who were of the strongest status, politically, socially, culturally. But now our society is inundated with the crying out of the impoverished. Our society is inundated with the voice of the people who have been victimized. Now, sometimes that's fair and sometimes it's not, but we live in a society right now where what James is saying is coming true. Now, what's interesting is, those who've been robbed are testifying against those who've taken. God listens to and always has had an affinity for the poor. Jesus spent most of his time with sinners and poor folk. God has an affinity for the poor. And one of the most interesting things that you have seen in our society, especially like culturally, is that I think the church has always felt it's the poor. We've always felt we're the poor, right? We've always felt we're the impoverished, we're the sinners. The church has always felt like we're the ones that James is sticking up for in this passage. But it's interesting when you look at our culture and you look at our society, who are they most angry with? The church. Those of religious standing. Those of conservative values, I guess is the way you would define it here in the States. Is you're having basically an outcry against the church. But what's interesting is the church has always felt it's the poor. But when you look back historically, the church has had authority everywhere it's ever been. So what you have is you actually have the church who thinks it's the poor looking at society going, why are you screaming at us? We're on your side. But the reality is the church has been the one with the wealth. The church has a deep, strong wealth. Now we look at it monetarily and we say, well, we're not wealthy. And we're not ones who've basically stolen or robbed from anybody. Unless you take a church history class. Then we've stolen and robbed from everybody. It's amazing what people will do, and they think their soul is on the line. The church historically has done all kinds of horrible things. The church historically has exercised power. But when you have the fact that God's greatest affinity has always been for the poor, something shifted. And when you look at our society right now, we live in a climate where the church is under attack, not because the church is martyred, but because the church is actually the one standing in power. The church is actually the one looking at people going, hey, you know what? You need to quit your whining and get to work. You hear that phrase in church more than you hear it anywhere else in society. You should get a job. And they're looking at us going, well, who are you to talk down to me? And it's interesting that James says that, listen, at some point, God is going to hear the cries of the poor. God is going to hear the cries of the disenfranchised. God is going to hear the cries of the people who are hurting. And now in our society, you can't stop that voice. No matter who's speaking, you can't stop it. Because that voice is gaining power, it's gaining authority, it's gaining momentum. And it would stand to reason then that God is hearing the cries of the poor. Now we look at it and say, well, no, but they're sinners. Right, the same two groups that God had the most affinity for. John's song, The Sign of the Times, at the very beginning of the service this morning. Exactly right. We live in a society now where the voice of the poor is becoming stronger. The voice of the disenfranchised is becoming stronger. And the church's job isn't to look down on it. The church's job is to join hands with it and raise it up. But instead, in many cases, we're standing there looking down and going, well, you need to go fix your own stuff first. We've become the rich. Self-indulgence has been our goal. Is what James is saying. When you're wealthy, it's about self-indulgence. The church has always, when it came time to eat, we eat, right? I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about nourishment. I'm talking about spiritual intake. We eat, man. We got Bible studies and small groups and books and Bibles on tape. And if you sell Bible on tape, please get it to me. Bibles on our phone, Bibles on everything. Man, we're taking it in. We can access 4 or 5 different things that we've read that day that really spiritually fed to us. We've taken time to consume is what we do. But the problem is during seasons of plenty, we don't share. We don't ultimately give it out. We do it to bring into ourselves. We do it to give to ourselves. We do it to feed ourselves. But this isn't about, monetarily rich. It's great to have money. But this is about people who have so much and they're not sharing. You condemned and murdered the innocent one who's not even opposing you. That's such a great truth. Is that Jesus was murdered by those kinds of people. Jesus was murdered by the people who had control, by the people who had wealth, by the people who had social wealth, who had cultural wealth, by the people who had control. They're the ones that murdered Jesus. Why? Because, honestly, the rich has just never been a fan of the people who speak up about the poor. People who have authority and power in our social structures do not like people who come in and try to disrupt that structure. We don't like it. We don't like rebellion and insurrection, even though we're a country born out of it. We don't like that. I always love it when I always hear people in church always say, well, you should do what your leaders tell you to do. Good Christians do what their leaders tell them to do. Right? You hear it all the time. Good Christians do exactly what they're told to do. You follow well. And my response always is, aren't you glad our founding fathers didn't act that way? Right? Aren't you glad that's not how our founding fathers operated? They went, no, we're not into this tyranny thing. So we're going to shoot at you with a musket. That's not good followership, right? That's bad following. That's being bad as far as being a lieutenant. So the idea that we, the rich hate when people come along and disrupt. But the church is in sort of an era of disruption now. In business it's called innovative disruption, right? Disruptive innovation. It's where you come in from the bottom and you disrupt. The reality is we're having a disruption coming in through the bottom right now in the church. Where the poor people are. Somebody's cars going on.
I don't know.
Since no one's going to be able to focus till we turn it on. Okay.
Didn't notice the thing on the house.
Okay, well everybody else over there did. The idea that we have this sort of disruption that's coming up from underneath in the church. We have people who are coming in saying, no, the church has been basically elitist. The church has been racist. The church has been socialist. The church has been all these things, and the church has sort of pushed people away, and the church stands there and goes, no, we haven't. Of course, we have no evidence to back up the contrary to that, but we haven't been. And so we're the ones standing basically in that sort of wealth when they're looking at us going, look, all we want is what you have. All we want is part of what you have. And we look at them and we say, no, you can't have it. It's ours. Because ultimately that's what it is. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Yeah, I think it's funny, I know. My Second Amendment folks are probably not going to like it. But I think it's funny. The thing on the internet with the Australian guy about guns, where he says there's only really one good reason that Americans should say that guns are okay. And he says, we all sit there and say it's for home protection, right? One good man with a gun can stop something bad. But really what it is we like guns. That's the only good reason, right? Because it's true, I love guns. Man, I love shooting stuff. It's fantastic. There's something so cool about pulling a trigger and watching something a long ways away go. Right? It is awesome. My father was a gunnery sergeant in the Marines. Or did he tell you? He still is. And I remember I went shooting with my dad one time, and he had an old M1 Garand, right, with the peep sight on the back, where you click, 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 click. And we were shooting at a shooting range out in Lincoln. And obviously I'm son of a Marine, so I'm pro guns. But my dad put that thing down, and they had this metal target that was so far away, it just looked like a little square. My dad drops that thing down. It's a boar. And I'm like, what? So I looked through the scope that I had on my rifle, and it was like a metal outline of a pig, right? A boar. He could see that. He fires, it was 200 yards off or so. Boom, ting, boom, ting, boom. This thing, dong, dong, dong. That was the coolest thing as a kid. You're like, yeah. Right? The British come back, he is going to mess them up. That was my feeling with my father. It was cool. I actually watched my dad shoot a deer jumping over the back of a doe. This buck ran around and jumped and boom, out of the air. And I was like, yes! And my dad would watch me shoot and he'd be like, no. Never more so did I embarrass my father. You missed again, didn't you? Maybe. I'm so happy when I finally hit a deer. That's my son. Calling me his daughter. But the idea that, right? The whole point of the guy on the internet is that, guns are fun, right? And when I hear these things about immigration, we sit there and we say, oh, we can't let them in because there might be thieves and terrorists. But really, what is it? They're going to take our stuff, right? They're going to take space, they're going to take land, they're going to take money. We've only got so much to go around. We got it kind of worked out okay right now. You start adding people, it gets all messed up. That's really what it is. For most of us, I'm sure there's some righteous folks in here who are very different than me, but I'm a sinner who has bad attitudes about a lot of things, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's really what it comes down to. It's not about the fierce speak of the right or the left. It really comes down to, bro, we only got so much room, and we want to leave Montana the way it is. So we can all pretend we're going to go there someday and see the trees, right? That's what we want. Let's be honest. Come on now, right? We like Wyoming, sparse, so we can go to Jackson Hole, ski, drive for a while and not see anyone. That's what we want. The reality is that we struggle with that disruption that comes from underneath and takes away. We struggle with the things that come in and ruin what we like. We finally got this thing dialed in. We finally got it worked out. I'll give you an example no, I'm not sure. Now, there probably aren't too many rich here. And I really hate the rich versus the world comparison. Because I'm a firm believer in the reality that it's all relative. You work hard, you make money, we live with tons and tons of stress. We do a lot, we exchange. But we are rich compared to many around us beyond monetary value. So when we start thinking of ways that we can apply a simple passage like this, so that we don't have, the massive amounts of waste. So we don't have the massive amounts of waste. So we can ask ourselves about personal forms of wealth and accumulation that we haven't shared, right? Because we all have things that we haven't shared. We all have things that we've sort of kept to ourselves. So when we look at some questions that we can take home with us. So how many workers in the field have you robbed of your testimony and knowledge of Christ? How many people in your life have you really robbed of what you know, of what you have to share, of the wisdom that you have, of the insight that you have? How much biblical knowledge and truth do you have rotting in your mouth? Now, the reason I like that question is I'm going to tell you. I've spent 6 years in college. I'm going to get that AA soon. I've spent 6 years in college, right, taking all these classes. I have taken classes on church history, biblical perspectives on death, leadership theory, fundamental organization. I'm trying to think of the most random. 20th century history of civilization, which actually was the name of the class. I've taken science at a Christian school, so don't worry, it's all creation. I've taken, don't worry, none of that intelligent design when I was in college. It was just about God. But I've taken all these classes. I have learned so much that has rotted in my brain because I never had reason or cause to use it. I have spent thousands of hours in class in my adult life. And when I look at the vast nature of biblical knowledge that I have, it's amazing how much goes to waste. It's amazing how much is thrown away. Now, most of you guys have been in church for more than 5 years. So assume you go to 30 Sundays a year. Because in America, I think that's going to church, right? I mean, think about all the hours that you've spent listening to people like me ramble on. All the time you've spent learning from some smart folks and from the other ones like, you've learned from a lot of people. Think about all the stuff you've taken in. Think about all the times you've had people in your life talk to you at Bible studies, all the time you spent reading Christian books, right? How many of you guys spent at least an hour with Joel Osteen, right? I mean, you guys have learned a lot over the years. The reality is how much of that has gone to waste? How much of that knowledge have you never bothered to apply in your own life? You know, I love how he says that you become fat and ready for slaughter. It's amazing what an easy target we are when we don't move quickly. You know, the reality is we've all become so just sort of on biblical knowledge, and we're not moving and using it and allowing people to learn from us, that we've become basically an easy target for society because the church has no evidence to the contrary of what people are saying about us. We sit there and say, no, we love people. And they're like, really? Show us. We care about people. Really? Show us. We embrace people. Really? Show us. Let me see one thing. Let me see one bit of evidence. And then we have so much spiritual stink in our lives. Areas of hypocrisy. Dave Ramsey talks about every dollar has a destination. Right? How many Dave Ramseys? Right? Every dollar's got a destination, praise of Jesus. Right? So in your spiritual budget, how much of the stuff that you have learned has zero purpose or destination? It's amazing how much stuff that we're like, no, I'm just here to feed, man. I'm just here to eat some more of that Bible. Just give it to me. But Pastor, don't give me milk. I want meat. Right? That's like old school stuff. Right? Gotta have meat. So I need a big full meal. Well, what are you going to do with it? Nothing. I'm going to nap. Duh. Sunday. Right? As a matter of fact, you've been talking a long time already, man. It's nap time. So if you have a plan and understanding, right, that nothing is yours to keep. Spiritually, nothing is yours to keep. Everything is ours to give away. Everything that we have as Christians, we're supposed to give away. We're supposed to give away our knowledge, our testimony, our understanding, our spiritual wealth, our depth, our concern, our love, our compassion. We're supposed to give that stuff away. But we have to be intentional about sharing it because in the end, ultimately, though, non-believers are not going to come to your door and knock on it and say, tell me about God. People who don't know about Jesus are not knocking on doors on Saturdays. That's not how it works. So we have to be intentional. And then probably the most important thing in all of life is we have to define success. One of the things that I learned more in the master's degree process is defining what success is. Because in every project, every paper, everything you write, you have to write what's your long-term goal in this. But you have to define what success is. As a football coach, I know 10 yards is a small success. It's a first down. Getting in the end zone is a medium success. It's called scoring points. But the larger success is winning. Right? I can get to winning, but I have to define it in terms of success points along the way. Now, the big win, of course, is smashing your opponent by 60. But that's not always possible unless you're playing Central. The idea is you have to define success as you go along. You have to define success in steps that you can understand, steps that you can achieve. And for a lot of us as Christians, we go, okay, well, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go be a better Christian. Oh, good. And how? Not a clue. I'm going to go tip more at Perco's. Okay, all right, there's a start, a little point of success. But we have to start thinking in terms of what defines our spiritual consumption versus our spiritual output. What does that mean? Do you actually have people that you are intentionally trying to share the gospel with? Do you have people that you are intentionally praying for every day? Do you have people that you are intentionally showing compassion for every day with the goal of leading them to Jesus? What is the plan? What is the long-term goal for what you are trying to do? You have to define success, because if you don't define success, then you're never going to find it. If your success looks like everybody else's success, then you're never going to get it either. What is your goal for winning? And is it something that you can actually do? Is it something that you can learn those steps as you go along? Is it something that you can assess consistently? Or is your goal to, I'm going to be a better Christian by not sinning tomorrow? Because you're going to fail more than likely. So if your goal is not sinning, then you're probably going to fail. And I only say probably because, I don't know. It depends when the Lord takes you home tomorrow. You might make it to breakfast. I don't know. But I know for anybody else, you're going to fail. Because you can't do that. But what you can do is because you're so busy about doing the work of the kingdom that you don't have time to sin as much as you would previously. But determining what means success to you. So I think if for a lot of you, I know most of you pretty well, it would be interesting to hear your answer. How would you define success in terms of better Christian living, in terms of spreading the gospel, in terms of missional existence? How would you self-evaluate? So if you were to plan a weekly assessment of your ministry, how would you evaluate that? What are the markers? Because I think for most of us, that's really where we fall on our face. That's where we fail, is because we never actually come up with a plan to succeed. We just plan to try, but that doesn't work. You know, when you start the football season, you don't just go, okay, kids, line up, we're going to run buck right. Ready, go. Because what's going to happen? They're all going to look at you like you're crazy. Because they have no idea what any of that is. So you have to start with the little things. You take the lineman, you put the lineman over, you work on basic single-step foot drills so that they're learning to move in the right way at the same time. So that your linemen don't run into each other. Because really the most embarrassing thing as a head coach is when you call a play, both guards pull and run into each other. It's like something out of a really bad movie. And when it happens and the crowd goes, oh, and you're like, don't turn around. Don't look at the crowd, right? Definitely don't look at your wife. The reality is, you have to get everybody moving the same way. So you have to define success before you just leap into, hey, let's go run this. You take your backs and your wide receivers over there and you work with them. You take the quarterback over there, you work with him, and everybody works on their individual parts, and you put it all together and you go. But then you don't just go, okay, everybody, first step. Set, go. One step. When you're working with young people, you still got one doofus who's going to take off and run, right? Oh, coach, didn't hear you. Well, the other 10 did. The reality is we want to make sure that we are building a success plan and we're moving slowly toward it. But you have to define what your goals are. You know, as we enter into resolution time, as we enter into the new year, we're going to talk a lot about what our spiritual long-term goals are, because we have to have long-term goals. What is your goal? Do you actually have a goal to lead somebody to Jesus? Is it just somebody vague without a face? You know, one of the greatest exercises I ever did was imagine the church full of people. All of us can do that, right? We're like, oh, I imagine thousands. It's great. But do we imagine them with no face? Or are they people we actually know? Most of the time we imagine them with no face, right? It's easier to imagine from the sound booth. Hands. Right? Everybody swaying with the music. You know, but the reality is we have to have that. So as we're looking into the new year, the idea is basically looking at developing strategic plans for our personal ministries, strategic plans for what we're trying to do in terms of getting healthy, getting strong, and making sure that we see the kingdom of heaven growing. So we're going to receive our offering as I close in prayer. So why don't we have our basket folks come forward? Since I'm so bad about receiving offering, that's why we play a game around here. Because if we didn't, I would never, ever, ever do this. So, all right, so let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for this morning. God, we thank you for a nice, relaxed Sunday after Christmas. God, we thank you for the season that we've enjoyed, giving and caring for each other and showing compassion. I thank you for all of the clothing and blankets that went out through Dan and Kim's ministry out to those in our area that were in need. I thank you for everybody's giving there. I thank you for Thanksgiving and the meals that we were able to get out to the families from my wife's school. I thank you for all the things that this church has done to show compassion and love for people in our community. And God, I believe that we are people on the right track as far as sharing and giving. So, Father, I pray your blessing this morning over the offering. I pray your blessing over each and every penny that comes in, and good stewardship of everything. In your name, amen.